Watch out, mate, watch out! Which is, of course, English for Achtung, Achtung. 80 years ago this week, one of those terrifying wartime incidents took place which would lead the news agenda for weeks if it happened now, but barely registered a ripple back in 1942. On the 13th of April in the Wiltshire village of Imber, an RAF Hurricane pilot taking part in a firepower demonstration accidentally strafed a crowd of spectators. 25 were killed and 71 wounded. 21-year-old pilot Sergeant William McLaughlin mistook the spectators for dummies, which he thought were part of the demonstration. McLaughlin was shot down and killed over France 10 weeks later. On that cheery note, good morning, Jim. You've got the Rona.
I've never heard of that, but
haven't you?
I mean, they're right. I mean, that would have barely registered a ripple. It's a bit like, John Derry crashing into the 1952 Farnborough.
Yes.
And 20 minutes later, his mate came in and broke the speed of sound.
Yeah, exactly. So the headline changed. I mean, there were a fair few of these sort of fatal accidents, weren't there? I mean,
there were, and people. The attitude was, don't want to make a fuss. These things happen.
There's a war on. These things happen. Carry on. There's sort of drownings of people trying to cross rivers in sort of. I think there's some terrible Home Guard accident where a load of people drowned trying to cross a river or something.
I don't know. Okay, well,
yeah, I think there's a sort of subculture of hideous, ghastly accidents.
Yeah. Well, I always remember it's about 30% of flying casualties are accidents.
The training, or accidents, yeah.
It's an incredible number, isn't it? Really, when you think about it.
Yeah. Well, and Tatton Park, where the embryonic airborne forces first. They were given. They were sent to Ringway to they created the landing school at Ringway, and then they were put up at Tatton Park near Knutsford, outside Manchester.
Yeah,
and Tatton Park, a very nice stately home, excellent place to be put up, but there's loads of lakes around it, so people were always it was renowned, and the Polish paratroopers had a song about how you were going to end. I think they had a song. They had a song about how the Whitley was a flying coffin, but then there was all this humour about ending up in the lake. And in the end, SOE practiced landing in the lake as a landing technique with the lakes at Tatton Park. So, I mean, it's just, the
stuff that went on in the Second World War, right?
Is that the name, the other alternate name of this podcast?
Yeah.
But James, you have the Rona, and how are you?
Well, I'm all right. I've heard what one can get it a lot worse.
Yes,
it's just sort of short of it. I went to my bed yesterday, so that was good. I caught up on the last 2 episodes of Peaky Blinders, and I started watching the Bridget Remargan, which has got a lot of chaffies in it, which I quite enjoyed. A huge number of chaffies.
Yeah.
Lack of Shermans, but a huge number of chaffies.
Well,
and it's got lots of people sort of going, the men are dog tired. War is hell. There's lots of that kind of stuff. And Robert Vaughan as the German Mayor Kruger. It's all really good.
I mean, it's
I didn't fall asleep watching it.
Well, no, that's fair enough. I think it's
it's a bit
pretty ropey. I remember interviewing, because there's the famous incident that the first American soldiers across the bridge, they shoot this guy in a black uniform because they think he's SS, and in fact he's the railway inspector or something.
Yeah.
I interviewed his son, the railway inspector. No. Yeah. When we did, because we did the Bridge
Berlin.
Yeah, for Road to Berlin, we did the Bridget Remargan. So we interviewed a guy who was like 51st across the bridge. Right. Because they were even in 2004, we're running out of veterans.
Yeah.
And we were just told
it's still quite high.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. It's pretty good. It means he's in the leading company at least. And he's basically going, where we got across and then we shot this guy who we thought was SS, and it turns out he was and then that. So we interview him, and then we go to talk to the bloke whose father was killed by the Americans coming across the river.
And how did he feel about it?
He wasn't best pleased, put it that way.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean,
it's an extraordinary.
That's from the vastity of life. If you're German in the Second World War, don't wear black, I guess.
Well, yes, I suppose. I mean, it's such a striking place, though. That bit where the Rhine's cutting through the hills and everything. It's an incredibly dramatic place, and that they crossed there. The sort of drama of the whole thing. You can completely see why you might make a film about it, even a slightly sort of doughy one full of chaff.
Well, I don't know if you remember the film. I mean, the film they shot it in, because I looked it up. I thought, God, did they really use the Bridge at Remagen? And it turns out they didn't. They used it one in Czechoslovakia, and they had to, and it was during the Soviet invasion.
Yeah.
So they all had to evacuate and
really
sack it off for 2 months until it all got sorted out.
Really?
Yeah, there was some town they were allowed to blow up.
Right.
Some entire town in Czechoslovakia that they were allowed to blow up. I mean, really? Because then I suddenly started seeing all these buildings being blown up, and I thought, well, that does look quite realistic, actually. I mean, it's just incredible.
Wow. I mean, that's the Czech government desperate for dollars, isn't it? That's what that is.
Yeah.
In '68. God, incredible.
And of course, huge numbers of chaffies. Sorry, I've just got to let my dog in. Hold on.
Yeah, sure.
Come on in.
He's just taking his dog in, dear listener.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I remember watching the Bridge at Remagen as a boy with the Colonel, and there's a bit where they're in the dark waving maps about like white bits of paper. Yeah. He's going, that's going to get them killed. They wouldn't do that.
No.
Stupid. And look at those tanks. And there's a bit where all the chaffies all line up along a hill line, inevitably, because it looks great.
Yeah. Silhouetted. But they've got lots of guns all too close together and things like that.
Yeah, it's all that sort of stuff. Yeah. But you got to fit it in the camera frame, haven't you? Now,
Ben Gazzara refusing to wear a helmet. That was everything.
Yes, yeah.
Some weird sort of pork pie hat.
Yeah,
completely odd and
yeah. But Saturday, I had the good fortune to visit the National Army Museum.
Oh yes,
and this is a very good exhibition on there, Jim. I don't know if you're aware of it. Called Brothers in Arms. Yeah. And I also had the good fortune to go round that exhibition with its curator.
Wow, lucky old you.
No, it was brilliant, Jim, and it's very, very effectively done, I think.
Well, thank you.
And having read the story obviously having read the book, twice, once in my head and once out loud. I mean, it was very interesting to see what you picked, because to distill all that, 600 pages of that you've presented as a book, how do you distill that down into, a sort of a living room sized exhibit? How did you make your choices, your shot selections? Because I was really interested by that afterwards, thinking to myself, because obviously you can't put everything in, you've got to leave stuff out. You concentrate on some characters. There's that interesting Rolodex right at the end where you can just go through what happens every day. How did you choose?
Well, it was really that was the biggest, most tricky thing of the whole thing. Really was to kind of where do you? So first of all, you kind of think, okay, well, what are you? Let's, rather than homing in on all 688 people that are serving in the regiment at any one time.
Yeah,
let's just home in on a handful of individuals. They're very keen to keep it. They're always very keen to keep it less rather than more.
Yeah, of course.
They wanted me to have 6, but I insisted on having 8. I'm glad I did, actually, and I felt 8 was fine. So you focus everything around them, and I was just trying to think about what are my big takeaways from the book and from studying that one regiment in such intensity. And I suppose it was the huge burden of command. I think it was the unbelievable relentlessness of it.
Yeah.
It was the privations, life in the tank. It was rapidly evolving tactics, and it was a huge number of casualties.
Yeah.
And then I think once you get to know people, you want to kind of know what happened afterwards. So, that seemed like an obvious thing to do the kind of sort of wrapping it up and just see, how did they fare post-war and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that was how really. And then it was a question of sort of getting the artifacts to kind of to fit it. In actual fact, there's comparatively few artifacts in that exhibition, really.
Well, that's
the card, playing card of Stanley Christopherson's jacket.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I mean,
and letters and diary extracts and stuff.
Yeah, but I think all the kind of quotes on the wall work quite well. And
yes, they do. Yeah,
and it is a small space, and it's not a very big exhibition, so you are limited. But I've got to say they were completely brilliant. They really let me, they went with what I wanted to do.
Yeah,
and they were very sort of liberating, really. I mean, they wanted me to have my own kind of stamp on it.
Yeah.
I was also very lucky to have sort of Andrew Whitworth, who runs the D-Day story in Portsmouth. He was a kind of sort of advisor, because he's done lots of exhibitions and everything. He'd sort of slightly rein me in occasionally, and he was very sort of sound and very helpful. Bringing his huge experience to bear. And then Jane Holmes, who kind of pulled it all together, was just fantastically efficient.
And is it something
it's quite interesting, the whole sort of machine of how that works.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, is it something you'd want to do again?
Well, maybe. I mean, it's quite a lot of work, but worth it. I don't know, maybe. I mean, I'm sort of, I feel very lucky to have had the opportunity to kind of curate it and put it on, to be honest. Well, I thought thanks to Justin Macheski, he's the director of the museum. He's an old pal, to be perfectly honest. A massive Italophile. He's got a place like near Cortona, and again, he's very up for ideas and sort of pushing the museum and getting guest curators in and all that. Kind of stuff. They couldn't have been more brilliant to work with, really.
Yeah, I thought it was really, really good. And I thought that you somehow convey a sense of intimacy with it, which I think is really a really interesting thing to do. And obviously that museum is very interested in people's stories and what happens to people in these, and that's very much the way those kind of museums are going at the moment, because the Tank Museum it's very about the people as well. The technology's there the tanks are there in front of you, but it's the people. The tanks are the hardware, the people are the software. And you want to know about the software rather than the hardware, really, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, a tank can only tell you so much, unless, of course, you get into what it represents in terms of sort of engineering and culture and procurement and the thinking that goes into it and all those sort of strands of thoughts. But I thought it was really 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 good, Jim. And,
I'm so thrilled you liked it. And
I got a picture of the tanker's noddy suit, so I was able to get the actual color reference that it's a sort of buff for
yes, it is. It's
any kit off stuff I might be doing. So because there is a kit off going on at the moment. Because after all, I saw you on Saturday with your daughter Daisy, footsore but elated from your efforts on Friday. So just tell us about the walk as well, Jim, because that's amazing.
Well, yeah, that was yeah. So I had this Normandy trip, so I got back, and the slightly frustrating thing about the Normandy trip was we were supposed to get into Portsmouth at 9:15. We didn't get until 10:15, and then there was some weird, nonsensical, completely frustrating delay getting off, where we all just stood by the information desk for kind of 50 minutes for no reason whatsoever. And no one explaining why we weren't getting off. Anyway, we eventually got off. Then I discovered that the M27 was closed. So then I had to sort of reroute around Southampton. So it was 00:35 by the time I got home.
Oh, jeepers.
Need a shower and sort of get in bed. And then I was all bits of buzzing. So I didn't really sleep very well. And then I had to get up at kind of 4:30. Start this walk at 5. So, and actually most of the day it was absolutely fine. It was a beautiful walk, and it was amazing, getting going with the dawn chorus and everything. It was just amazing and a beautiful, beautiful walk. The only time it started getting really, really bad was I suddenly started thinking, God, I've got a really bad cold here.
Yeah.
And, I've got 8 miles still to go, and I was really sort of struggling. And of course, the following day I kind of realised what that was all about. But it was an amazing thing to do, and we've made over £8,500.
Incredible,
which is incredible. And that's sort of decent money. So
yeah, that's really, fantastic.
Really, it's one of those things you just don't forget. You don't forget it. And Daisy and her best friend Lotta had never, the most she'd ever walked was something like 10 miles or something.
Right. All right.
To walk 38 in one day, I think aged 14 is quite impressive. My brother and I, we've done these long walks before, and actually even Daisy's done one before. But I still think to do that cross country at 14 is is really going some. So absolutely no question, the true heroines of the show are Daisy and Lotta.
Yeah.
And my brother was sort of directing all the kind of fundraising that he might do through Daisy's account.
Yeah.
And using his sort of huge social media arsenal. heft. Yes, a very, very good cause, and it was a very, very memorable day, and I'm really, really, really glad we did it.
It's brilliant, and you were money. And that was for DKMS, who are the Blood Stem Cell Register charity, and that the tests they send out, the stem cell tests they send out, you get them free, and they come. It's all done when you do it. It's all free at the point of use, but they cost about 40 quid each. So that's a couple of hundred tests you've paid for, basically.
Well, that's fantastic,
which is brilliant, right? And I mean, while we're discussing our extraordinary good works here, we've had an incredible. We're all going to heaven. We've had an incredible response to our modelling competition in aid of those suffering in Ukraine. Still time to enter. Check the hashtag #KitOff on Twitter. More than £2,000 raised so far, and we'll be donating £10 for every entrant. So that should get us well beyond £3,000. That's Red 5. Simon from Red 5 Models is organising and judging the competition. I'll be having a look as well. But I've started making something. I've started making a Churchill because I couldn't look at all the photos of people making things and think no, I can't get involved. So I'm trying to do a really scuzzy Churchill.
Yeah, that's good. That's
my contribution. Yeah. Because the Tamiya Churchill is a simple kit.
Well, I saw a number of Churchills last week in Normandy. So I did.
Yes, I wanted to. You want to talk about Normandy, don't you? You want to talk
a little bit, because it's one of those things that it's one of the. I mean, I know I've said it a lot of times, but walking the ground is incredibly useful. And one of the reasons it's useful is because every time you go to somewhere like Normandy, it prompts you to think of things in a different way.
Yeah,
and it makes you sort of question, what you said before and.
Yeah,
I saw a lot of. I did see a lot of Cromwells, all of which were painted incorrectly, which was slightly annoying. There's a really gopping one just outside Colville, Montgomery. That's a great story. You know that story? Why it's called Colville, Montgomery?
Well, it's his family. It's the Norman family name, isn't it?
Well, apparently, maybe
or not.
But no. Apparently, what it is the mayor of Colville, Sir Mayor.
Yeah,
they said, right, the first Allied soldier that comes on, that we see on the beach, we're going to rename the town after him. So some sort of private goes, well, I don't know about that, cop. Better kind of bring that up to my sergeant. The sergeant goes, well, I don't know about that. Better talk to the platoon commander. The platoon commander goes, oh, I don't know. I could do that. I mean, we all see the company commander. The company commander goes, well, I can't do that. And it goes all the way up to Montgomery. He goes, thank you very much. And that's what's called Colville, Montgomery. So
it's not his Norman conquering name from
no,
right?
No, it's post D-Day 1944. But anyway, be that as it may, just outside Colville, Montgomery, there's an Avery.
Yes, it's at Hillman, isn't it? It's at the Hillman site, isn't it?
No, it's not.
No,
there now is a rusty one there's a rusty one.
Yes, there's a rusty one at the Hillman site,
which doesn't really sit well because obviously there weren't any Churchills at Hillman. But
no,
but that doesn't matter. It's still nice to see it.
Yeah.
But the one outside Colville, Montgomery, or a bit further on, whatever the town it is, I can't remember. It's just a horrible sort of limey green, and it's just in every which way you look at it, it's just wrong. But anyway, Then there's another one up at Hill 112. And it's Hill 112 that's really, really got me thinking.
Yeah.
Because you stand up there, and I mean, you've been up there, haven't you? You know what it's like. It's kind of it's a big old landscape.
Yeah,
it really is, and you kind of think about who's up there at the time.
Yeah,
10th to the 18th of July. This is the ultimate. This is the time of attrition, isn't it? This is just before Goodwood. It's before the fall of St. Lo in the west. It's before Cobra gets launched.
Yeah,
who's there? Well, you've got the 2 SS Panzer Corps there.
Yeah.
You got 10, and under that you've got 10 SS, 9 SS, 12 SS, 1 SS, and just around the corner is 21st Panzer.
Yeah,
that's a big old chunk of your 10 Panzer divisions, all in that area, and that's not in the con area. That's 21st Panzer are kind of in the con area, but that's a big chunk of your main Panzer divisions are in that area, and that's where they're getting chewed up from the start of Martlet on the 25th of June.
Yeah,
where you're up against Panzerlehr and the 12th SS.
Yeah,
through to the final irrevocable capture of Hill 112 and that surrounding ground on whatever it is, 22nd of July, in that kind of 4 weeks, that is when 5 of the 10 panzer divisions are totally chewed up.
Yeah.
And if your job of securing victory in Normandy is to chew up panzer divisions because they're the best panzer divisions, primarily above everything else,
yeah,
then that tells you that that is the most strategic importance. That is an area of most greatest strategic importance, I would say.
Yeah, that's the where the battle is happening.
That's where it's really more than any other location on the Normandy battlefield, I would say.
Right,
and it's weird. And I know Jonathan Ware's kind of into this theory, and he thinks it's all very, very, it's quite deliberate, and we've just underplayed it in our history and all the rest of it.
Yeah,
I'm not sure it's as clear cut at the time as he makes out. He may well be right, and I may be wrong, but my sense of it is that it isn't as clear cut at the time. So I think it is one of those kind of learning that with in retrospect. But it is really interesting because when you are on Hill 112, you really can see for miles. But you can see Caen, you can see beyond, you can see the Breville Ridge, you can see it all. You can see all the way through to sort of Comont. You can see the Roré Ridge. You can see everything. You can not quite see back to the sea, but it, and then you can see further south as well. So you can see why that sequence of that rising ground south of the River Odon, the Odon Valley, is so incredibly important. And then you think about how much sort of blood was spilt on that. And you think that the Germans have 9 panzer divisions, 1 panzer grenadier division. And the British just have 3 armored divisions in the whole thing.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they have independent armored brigades as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think it just suddenly occurred to me that actually, if I was doing Normandy again, I think I'd make a bit more emphasis on that.
But it's as much an infantry battle as it is anything else, though, isn't it? It's that it's these endless. I mean, or rather, integrated combined operation. Combined arms battle as much as anything else, isn't it? Because because after all, that's how you do. That's how you assault, and this is part of the relentless assault stage that the Allies are having to do.
Yeah,
it's a thing. That's a thing I've been trying to get my head around in the last few weeks. That you can't have your there's no breakout without a breakthrough, and this is part of an endless, relentless assault phase. That every German defensive line needs assaulting in a fresh way, and that's just a thing that started on the beaches and is now making it. And this kind of high ground is critical to what you're trying to do, but you have to do it. I mean, it's interesting the Germans are committing. Obviously, we know what a German armoured division is, but the Germans are committing in terms of armoured divisions, and the British are committing in terms of all arms. That it's an all arms battle, and what you're trying to do is suck the German armoured divisions into your combined arms mincer, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're trying to get them to attack. You're trying to get them to counterattack, basically.
Yes.
So you can destroy them, because that's what they're going to do, and your artillery is that much more powerful. I mean, however, this fighting is absolutely ghastly, isn't it? And it's,
it's terrible.
The hill the top of the hill changes hands several times, and the Germans. I mean, obviously, the other thing I think that the hindsight, the problem I think with a lot of this is that we've got operational names for all this stuff, Epsom and Charnwood and
Jupiter and
exactly, and so with hindsight you look at it in those terms. But if you're the Germans, you don't know Operation Charnwood has just started. You don't know that Epsom has completed and has it met its objectives or not in a way that satisfies Carlo d'Este. 30 years later.
Yeah.
None of those things are how the Germans are viewing this. That if anything, they're just thinking, if they're thinking anything, they're thinking, here comes another colossal crack. That this is yet another gigantic blow that if they succeed, they will break out. They will break through and break out.
Yeah.
And they're being because we talked the other day at the National Army Museum about that the incident with the tiger.
In Fontenay, in the Rue Massif.
Yeah, and I said, so what's going on here? What do we know about? Is he lost? Does Does he just not know that the Sherwood Rangers are there? What's happening? Or is it just in the, get some tanks together, get up to the top of the next hill, the British are coming, or we think they're in this village. He doesn't know where he is, and so he runs into them. Because after all, the Germans are just doing this endless firefighting, this endless reconstitution of degraded units on a sort of permanent basis. And obviously that's the thing people kind of admire about the way the Germans run their defences. They're able to do this reconfiguration on the fly, but they have no option. That's that's pure necessity being the mother of invention.
It's what Steve Prince called the freedom of poverty.
Yeah, exactly.
They're able to put these battle groups together, these Kampfgruppen together very quickly. Yeah. But it's a sign of fundamental weakness that they're in a position to be able to do that in the first place.
Well, and they've got no option. They haven't got time to sit around.
The Rue Massue thing, the John Semkin meeting that Tiger tank from the 101st Heavy Panzer Battalion, which is Michael Wittmann.
Yeah,
at around 5:20 p.m. on the Monday, the 26th of June, 1944, is a really, really interesting episode because it shouldn't have been there, and it turns the southern end of the street, and at the far end of the street is a farm. And in the farm is the headquarters of Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry, and Christopherson standing outside his command tank, Robin Hood, and he suddenly sees this Tiger tank and just thinks, "Holy moly!" And at the precise same moment, John Semkin, who's the commander of A Squadron, turns into the Rue Massue, therefore protecting David Christopherson and the headquarters, and fires first, and fires 10 rounds at this Tiger tank before the Tiger tank has had a chance to fire any, and the crew subsequently bails out. So the question is, what on earth is it doing there? And there's one of two options. I.e., one is that Max Wunsch, who is a regimental commander in the 12th SS Panzer Division, has been asked by Panzer Meyer, the commander of the 12th SS, to get a battle group together to defend the Rore Ridge at come what may. And so he's throwing different units in, different infantry, different grenadiers, Panzer IVs from one unit, Panthers from another unit, and these Tiger tanks from the 101st Heavy Panzer Battalion, which were not originally part of the 12th SS, but which have been seconded to the 12th SS.
Yeah.
And they're on their way to join the 12th SS on the 13th of June when they shoot up the leading elements of 7th Armoured Division at Villa Bocage, infamously. And what one has to remember is that these units have just never fought before. They've never fought together before. And so, and also, it's a very tight piece of ground. You're talking about 3 miles by 2. So the 101st, the Tiger that turns around the Rue Massue in Fontenay-le-Pesnel would have come from Texel, which is a bit further over to the west and just a little bit south of Fontenay. And it may be that he thought he was turning into Rore.
Yeah.
And just got it wrong. Fog of war and all the rest of it. Or he might have been doing the glory shot and trying to do a kind of, another Wittmann.
Yeah.
We'll never know. But it didn't end well for him. And it's amazing. And it tells you all sorts of stuff. It tells you that he who fires first in Normandy generally comes out on top. And it's not about destroying tanks. It's about knocking out the tank. It's about the crew surrendering and you being able to hold that tank and them not being able to recover it.
Yeah. Tell you what, should we take a very quick break and then we'll come back because I think there's still much more to talk about with Hill 112 and so on. Because it's anyway. We'll see you in a tick. Welcome back to Weird Ways to Make You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland, of course. So on the 14th of July, Montgomery, and this is to do with Hill 112 and, the Battle of the Odon or whatever you want to call it. He says, he sends his military assistant to London to brief the director of military operations, saying the real object is to muck up and write off enemy troops. Right? This is what...
there you are.
Right? On the eastern flank, Montgomery is aiming to do the greatest damage to enemy armour. All the activities on the eastern flank are designed to help the American forces of the West, blah, 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 blah. So that
So this is on the 14th?
Yeah. This is what...
So this is 4 days before Goodwood?
Yeah. So this is what they're briefing London, Shafe with. They're saying, this is what we're trying to do. And I think what they're also reminding everyone of that's what they'd agreed they were going to be trying to do. But I mean...
Well, that's exactly what they are doing. So I don't. Again, that's rather a feather in the cap for Monty. And
yeah, I mean, the thing is though,
that's exactly what's happening.
The thing is though, what the Germans, what's happening to the Germans is they're being sucked into this sort of situation they can't resist, and in lots of ways, it's sort of, it's the Allied way of doing things. So this is like Big Week, isn't it? You create a situation where the Germans have to react.
Yeah.
Because if they don't react, they'll be overwhelmed. So it's that idea of drawing the enemy to battle, isn't it? Bringing them to battle, and you can destroy them because you know that you've got the stuff, the men, the means to do it. And so that's how you bring your advantage to bear. But is there not? I mean, of course, the reverse danger, isn't it? Is that the British overcommit to this battle yourself and leave yourself, is not the worry that you leave yourself open to German exploitation elsewhere because you've committed so heavily to one sector of the Normandy battle line.
Well, yes, and that. Do
you see what I mean?
I do, exactly, and that is, I mean, that's the reason for withdrawing off Hill 1 and 2 at the end of Epsom. Yeah. Which costs a lot later on. And it's a controversial decision. I happen to think it was the right decision because the point of Epsom obviously was to you can get a breakthrough, great, but the main point was to make sure that the Germans were never in a position to counterattack in a coordinated way ever again. Once Epsom's over, it's over for the Germans in Normandy.
Yeah,
that's the big thing about Epsom. It seals the Germans' fate in Normandy. It's not the decisive breakthrough. And from the point of view of looking at the ground, it looks terrible because hardly moved at all. And although actually, when you're on the ground, when if you're say at sort of Norry-en-Besson, and you look to the kind of far ridge, and that's where they've got to get to on kind of day one, you think that's quite a long way. Actually.
It's quite a tall order, yeah.
It's quite a tall order. So to do that, to actually be on Hill 112, which is 7 miles to the south or something, in 4 days, a really tough bitter fighting with more and more German panzer units from various panzer divisions being thrown into battle as they come. Okay, so they haven't had a chance to reconnoiter. They haven't had a chance to properly deploy. But, they're motivated. They've got lots of weaponry. That's not a bad achievement. And I think that's the key to it is that, but then they have to kind of pull back because they've got too big a salient. I mean, no one likes a salient because it makes you vulnerable, whether it be the cursed salient or whatever it is. And the danger is that those British troops at the tip of the salient get isolated and cut off, and that wouldn't do at all.
Yes,
it was probably the right decision.
Well, because after all, if you're bearing steel, not flesh in mind, you're thinking in terms of you're not going to. I mean, you don't want to lose men unnecessarily, and that's also tied into not the Monty idea that you don't take on a battle that you might lose. You don't put yourself in a situation where you might lose because
it's unthinkable. It's just completely unthinkable.
Exactly, but also because you've had the first 2 years of the war, the contagion of defeat in the British Army, where the minute the generals. People are very much thinking the minute things go wrong, they might go completely wrong, aren't they? Because that has been happening. And so what you do is you I mean, you can call it play it safe if you want, but that's to misunderstand what they're actually doing because there's no sense that these battles are safe. I mean, I think that's often where people are, too cautious playing it safe. You look at the fighting at Hill 112.
Yeah, there's nothing safe about it.
There's nothing safe about it. There's yes, it's cautious in relative terms, but in terms of bringing extreme violence to the enemy and the enemy bringing it to you, it's not cautious whatsoever.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And again, you look at that landscape. Any infantry attack going up that hill, right? You're exposed. the minute you break your hedge lines, you're exposed. The minute you leave any cover, you're in. You're every man's a potential dead man. And I think these sort of ideas of caution. Again, we've talked. Hindsight has come up an awful lot talking about this. I think these ideas about caution are all very well, but
it's only you're not going to feel very cautious if you're in the DLI, are you?
Exactly.
And so that's the whole point about the people complaining about the tanks and sort of this idea that when morale is low because Shermans are too much like Tommy cookers.
Yeah.
I mean, what I think is really interesting is that obviously the Tiger and the Panther come into their own. Where you've got big, wide open spaces.
Yeah.
Because they've got the greater velocity, which means they can fire from further away, and that's where their armour kicks in. The distances are greater. But in Normandy, that counts for absolutely nothing. Because what counts I would suspect what counts for more is manoeuvrability. Yeah. And obviously, Sherman and the Cromwell have manoeuvrability in far greater manoeuvrability than a Panther or a Tiger.
But the Churchill isn't a manoeuvrable tank, but is because it can grind itself up any hill, up any slope.
Yeah, so that's its USP, and also its USP is the fact that you can turn them into crocodiles, which are awesome.
Yeah,
but and ferocious and all the rest of it. But I mean, in North Africa, what you want clearly is a tiger, and panthers, because there's big wide open spaces. There's not an awful lot of buildings in the way, and distance really counts. But in Normandy and most of Northwest Europe, it's really, really close.
Yeah.
I mean, I was reminded of this yesterday, the other day, when we were kind of driving over, we were sort of following the ground all around Operation Bluecoat, following sort of 30 corps kind of advance.
Yeah.
And we were looking at all the stuff where the Rangers have been, and down at sort of Jerk and La Bigne and Onderfontaine and Montpinçon and all that. Yeah. And it's amazing, really, because it's just fold after little dip after little dip. Edge, wood, another ridge, another little fold and another little dip. And you're talking about really, really small distances of space and I just thought, manoeuvrability is everything.
Yeah.
In this, in a way that having colossal clunking armor and cumbersome tracks isn't.
Well, and also what you need is tanks with a low profile that are easy to hide, and all that sort of thing. Which is why Stugs are so come into their own so much. I mean, of course, this is after all the sort of in the tank story, the British tank story, and we talked about this the other week. That yes, the Matilda in the desert is crap, but it was designed for close French countryside.
Yes,
it was designed for hedgerows. It was
designed so what's the Tiger and the Panther designed for?
The Tiger's initially a breakthrough tank,
but it's designed to operate in the Eastern Front and in North Africa, isn't it?
Yeah, where it has space. Yeah, well, where you can stand off from the enemy and fix him before he ever gets close to you, which is what it's so good at in those sets of circumstances. But then 1944, you're back in close French countryside, aren't you?
Yeah,
and basically all the lessons you've learned about tanks in the desert are arguably null, aren't they? Yeah. Which is sort of then. So then, I mean, obviously, I mean, I was struck by this. Just looking at the tank noddy suit, at the Sherwood Rangers, your exhibition, thinking, right, so that's issued late 1944 because it's because winter's coming and they need
they start getting issued.
They need a new overall. So I'm thinking, right, so when was that designed? When was that commissioned? When was that someone's bright idea? When did they decide it needed 4 pen holders here or 6? When was that decision made? When was the cotton bought? When were the looms set up? And you start to realize that, all of these decisions are fairly well deeply embedded, and that so much of what's delivered in 1944 to deliver the winning blow in Normandy, because after all,
it's what in 43 and earlier.
43, 42 earlier. So they're all coming from ideas that have been kicking around 39, 40, 41, to judge so many, they got the wrong stuff in 1944 to fight the Germans in Normandy. So there's a school of thought, well, yeah, but so many of the lead times on a tank, the Sherman sort of bunged together in 1941 really as a concept, and they're doing it all of this very, very, very quickly. That in itself is remarkable, and the speed surely means they're going to muff some things. I mean, that's the other. I just sort of, when you think of the way the time passes. After all, I mean, the pandemic was 2 years, wasn't it? And to some extent that flew by, and some of it crawled by. But getting your head round the Second World War for me, it's a distant event. It's 6 years. And sometimes I think, it's a terribly long time. But then I did a gig in Blackburn last night. I've not been there for 12 years. And now I think about it, that's ages ago.
Yeah.
But also the rest of that tour in my mind is yesterday.
Right.
So the tricks time plays. And I think sometimes when people look at the history of the Second World War, they forget about the tricks that time plays. That, from 1942 to 1944, June 1942, the British Army arguably can't tie its own shoelaces in the desert. It's running around making all sorts of terrible mistakes. It's been shattered at the Gazala line and all this sort of stuff, and really, really can't. But only 2 years later is delivering this stuff in Normandy. That's and fighting this battle that we're talking about, which is designed as a meat grinder to waste the enemy. That speed of transformation is incredible.
Well, you think of the kit they do have.
Exactly.
And the amount of ordnance they have, and the fact that they've got an armor-piercing, discarding sabot about.
Exactly. And I think sometimes the hindsight is such a powerful and dangerous thing sometimes to apply to a lot of this. Rather than to go look at if you look at the transformation of the army from 1940 to 1944, it's incredible.
Yes, it is incredible. And ditto, obviously it goes without saying with the United States, from
from
June 1940 to
from a standing start. Well, and in 1939, Marshall is put in charge in the 1st of September 1939, and the Defense Secretary at the time doesn't want an army formed. He thinks it's a bad idea. So Marshall starts running the army up in opposition to the Defense Secretary, and is having to do sort of smoke and mirrors to get it past the American Secretary of Defense because he's not interested. And you think that the American thing from a standing start is absolutely amazing.
It's absolutely amazing. It's absolutely
amazing. And Kasserine,
about,
they get wrong-footed at Kasserine, and then they fix it. And that's the more amazing thing about what happens at the Kasserine Pass is not that the Americans are defeated. I mean, why wouldn't they be? It's their first encounter with the Germans, so it's terribly serious.
Yeah, I think they're completely. I think American historians have been completely hung up on this totally unnecessarily. I think it's entirely unsurprising that they had got a bloody nose, and it was nothing more than a bloody nose. It was a real, in the big scheme of things, it wasn't an earth-shattering event, and
yeah.
The important thing is the lessons they learned as a result of it, which were enormous.
Yeah.
And my view is that they need to sort of give themselves a rest over this one, to be honest.
Yeah. I agree, because, the standing start that they've done to get an army to Tunisia, to get an army to North Africa, and then win a colossal victory.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary. It's truly extraordinary. That
it really
achievement.
Is.
Yeah, and they don't go through the British phase of ignominy and defeat and evacuations. The Americans. Do the Americans get to do an evacuation in the Second World War? I don't think they do.
No, they never do. They never do. They never do an evacuation. Whereas obviously we've done quite a few of them.
We're good at it. But that's once you get good at something, you want to do it again, don't you? That's the truth.
Yeah, that's all. Well, as we know, evacuations in the Second World War pretty successful.
Yeah, they're always successful. Yes, I mean that.
Which suggests one of a number of things, doesn't it? It suggests either that they're actually quite easy to pull off, or people are just on the spot very brilliant at doing them.
Well, yeah,
or maybe
absolutely.
It's a combination of the two.
Well, or in that kind of clinch, that you get good at that, don't you?
Well, it's because on a narrow front, it's very easy to defend.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it?
Well, yes. And that brings us back to it's easy to defend, isn't it? Which is the story of Hill 112.
Yeah.
Because once you're established, the Germans take ages to winkle out because it is easy to defend, not because they have better kit, not because the Allies are incompetent, but because that countryside lends itself to defence.
Yeah, completely.
And not assault.
Completely.
And that's why assault...
It's just a reminder last week wandering around Normandy and just how tough it is a place to attack. I mean, really. I mean, with all the guys we were with, and we also did the 12th SS attack against the Canadians on D+1.
Yeah,
we went to Alti and the Abbaye d'Ardenne and all that kind of places, and you're struck again that they're basically up against one battalion and 50 odd tanks.
Yeah,
and they can't make any impression really. They push them back about a mile.
Yeah,
and that's it.
But Jim, just tangentially from what you just said, it's a really difficult place to attack. Where is a good place to attack?
I suppose so.
If you're up against an opponent who's basically, got their act together, and there's no denying the Germans have their act together in Normandy, right?
Yeah.
And they ought to. They've been doing it a long time, and they're well keen on it, right? But where is a place? Because after all, the moment you get into open spaces, it's difficult to attack because they're wide open spaces and you can be seen a mile off.
I think wide open spaces are easy to attack as long as you've got you've got better guns than you've got Tigers against Shermans. I mean, I think North Africa's quite a good place to attack, really, for the most part. I mean, the problem you've got in Normandy is you've either got really tight hedgerows or you've got sort of wide open field, but with folds and hidden bits and lots of woods, and all of which makes it very difficult for advance. But I mean, that's why there is a rule of thumb of 3-to-1 manpower advantage. But actually, that's nothing more than a rule of thumb, and actually you want more like about 10-to-1, really.
Yeah. Well, and it's an 8-to-1 advantage at the Second Battle of Monte Cassino, isn't it? And they still don't pull it off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's arguably all sorts of reasons for that. But
But exactly.
Anyway, God, that was. I wanted to talk about combat fatigue, but we're going to have to talk about that another time.
Let's talk about that next time.
Yeah, because that, and also, a friend of mine, he said, and he's a keen smoker. He said, "What about the history of smoking in the Second World War? No one wants to talk about that, do they? Because obviously we don't talk about smoking."
Well, I think I might have found someone to talk about that. So yes, so I will pursue that. But we can talk about the War of Nerves.
I want to talk about combat fatigue because I've been reading this really amazing book from the 1980s that's like a Cold War treatise about combat fatigue.
This is Ben Shepherd.
Like it's a polemic from the 80s about if we have a conventional war in Europe, this is what's going to happen, and that modern battle will move too fast to remove men to the regimental aid post and let them have a sleep and give them a hot meal because it's all going to be happening too fast. And he says there's going to be hordes of men driven insane by battle roaming Europe in a state of insanity. It's a great read. Anyway, well, thanks for joining us today. Don't forget the kit off.
It feels like it's been a little while actually since you.
Yeah, it has. Well, it has though, hasn't it? Yeah, it has. Yeah, don't forget the kit off. Hashtag kit off, run by Simon from Red 5 Models. If you want to donate to DKMS, go to www.dkms.org.uk or register as a blood stem cell donor, or seek out Jim's or Daisy's link for fundraising because his feet are still sore.
Actually, they're all right now.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Well, you're mainly concerned with COVID. And if you want more of this sort of thing, there is our Patreon. Have a look out for our Patreon. We have ways of making you talk. Patreon because we do a live cast every other Monday where we talk about, well, basically what's floating through our minds at the time, and we try and answer your questions on occasion. And it's a sort of hangout is what young people call it, isn't it, Jim?
Yeah.
Anyway, get well soon, Jim.
Cheers.
We're back on Thursday. On Thursday, I think we're talking to Julia Jones about the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve, except not the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve, the yacht bit that has an acronym I can't remember, aren't we?
RNVVR or
exactly. Yet another part of the nave of the forces with an acronym that I don't remember. So it's the Volunteer Yachtsman. We will see you all soon. Thanks for listening. Cheerio.
Cheerio.